The words rang in Asha's ears, and her hands froze mid-fold over the crisp, white bedsheet. Little Clara, the billionaire CEO's 7-year-old daughter, giggled innocently, her big blue eyes wide with the excitement of sharing a secret. Asha looked at the girl, unsure how to respond. She managed a weak smile. "That's not something to joke about, sweetie." "I am not joking," Clara insisted, climbing onto the bed. "Daddy always talks about you. He even said your smile is the prettiest he's ever seen." Asha felt her face grow hot. This wasn't the first time Clara had said something peculiar. A few weeks back, Clara told her, "Daddy likes it when you sing in the kitchen. He says it reminds him of sunshine." Asha had laughed it off then. This time, it felt different. Clara was too earnest, too sure. Asha's heart pounded. Her boss, Mr. Grant Thompson, wasn't a cruel man, but he had never shown her anything more than professional politeness. He rarely even looked her in the eye. "Let's not talk about grown-up stuff," Asha said quickly, folding the last of the sheets. "How about we go pick a book for story time?" Clara pouted but nodded, hopping off the bed. As she skipped down the hall, Asha's mind churned. She'd been working for the Thompsons for 3 years, a steady job that kept her mother's medical bills paid and her younger brother in college. It wasn't easy being the only black woman in a house that glittered with wealth, but she was proud of how far she'd come. She followed Clara into the library, the room where her world had once flipped upside down. It was there, just 2 months ago, that she overheard the whisper. "She's smart, hard-working, and beautiful," Mr. Thompson had said. Asha had paused, hidden behind a bookshelf, holding her. "She's the help, Grant," came the biting reply of his wife, Lydia. "And don't forget what she is. People like her don't belong in our world." Asha had slipped away before hearing more, but those words stuck to her like burrs. People like her. She'd worked tirelessly, avoiding any interaction that might invite trouble. Yet now Clara's innocent remarks reopened the wound. That night, as Asha washed dishes in the silent kitchen, the sound of footsteps startled her. She turned to see Mr. Thompson. His tie was undone, and he looked unusually nervous. "Asha," he said softly, "can I speak with you for a moment?" She stiffened, gripping the dish towel. "Of course, sir." He paused, running a hand through his neatly combed hair. "I've noticed you've been quieter lately. Is everything okay? If T here is something wrong, please tell me." Asha blinked. "What game is this?" She kept her voice steady. "Everything's fine." He hesitated, then took a step closer. "You are an incredible part of this household, Asha. Clara adores you. And I appreciate everything you do." There it was again, that crack in the professional distance. Asha felt the room close in. "Thank you, sir. But if that's all, I should get back to work." He opened his mouth as if to say more, but then nodded, stepping back. "Of course. Have a good night." Asha spent the night twisting in her sheets. Every moment she'd spent in this house suddenly felt loaded, like a ticking bomb. She couldn't stay. Not with this unspoken tension, not with the possibility of Lydia catching wind of her husband's feeling. The next morning, she handed in her resignation. Mr. Thompson's face fell, but he didn't argue. Lydia simply smirked, as if she'd expected it all along. Clara cried when Asha told her goodbye. "You can't leave," she wailed. "You are my best friend." Asha hugged her tightly, her own tears threatening to spill. "You are going to grow up to be an amazing person, Clara. Always be kind, okay?" As she walked out of the Thompson mansion for the last time, Asha felt both lighter and heavier. She didn't know where she'd go next, but she knew she deserved to be somewhere she could breathe. A year later, Asha sat in her own small but cozy apartment, scrolling through her phone. An article popped up. "Grant Thompson files for divorce." The headline was followed by details of his high-profile split from Lydia. Asha exhaled deeply. She thought about Clara, about the life she left behind. Maybe someday the world would change, and people like her wouldn't have to carry the weight of prejudice on their back. But until then, she'd keep walking forward, one step at a time. Months passed, and life moved forward for Asha, though not without challenges. She found a new job managing a small bakery in the heart of the city. It wasn't glamorous, but it was her. She'd built relationships with regular customers, crafted the perfect playlists to fill the quiet moments, and even started experimenting with recipes from her childhood. One crisp autumn morning, as the bakery bustled with customers, the door chimed. Asha glanced up from the counter, and her breath hit. Standing there, looking out of place among the rustic decor, was Grant Thompson. He looked different, more casual, almost unguarded. He wasn't wearing a suit, just a simple sweater and jeans. His eyes met hers, and he gave a small, hesitant smile. Asha froze, unsure what to do. The noise of the bakery seemed to fade into the background. "Asha," he said, his voice low but steady. "I didn't know if I'd find you here." "What are you doing here, Mr. Thompson?" she asked, keeping her tone polite but distant. She couldn't afford to let him crack the walls she'd spent the past year building. "Please, call me Grant," he said, stepping closer to the counter. I just wanted to see you. To say thank you." Her eyebrows knit together. "Thank me? For what?" "For everything," he said. "For being such an important part of Clara's life. For your kindness, your patience, and for walking away when things got complicated." Asha crossed her arms, trying to keep her voice steady. "It wasn't a choice I wanted to make, but I had to protect myself. You know that." He nodded, guilt flickering across his face. "I do. And I am sorry for the position I put you in. I've spent the past year thinking about the way things ended, about how unfair it was for you." Asha didn't know what to say. She wanted to believe he meant it, but her guard was up. Too many times she'd seen apologies turn hollow. "Why are you really here?" she asked, her voice firm. "What do you want, Grant?" He looked down for a moment, gathering his thoughts. "I want to make things right. Not just with you, but with myself. After you left, everything fell apart. My marriage, my sense of who I thought I was. Losing you made me realize how much I'd been blind to, how much I'd ignored because it was easy." Asha's heart ached, but she kept her expression unreadable. "And now you think showing up here fixes?" "No," he said quickly. "I know it doesn't, but I wanted to try. Even if it's just to let you know that you deserved better, that you deserve everything good in this world." For a moment, the room felt too small. Asha didn't know what to say. She'd spent so long trying to forget, trying to move on. Yet here he was, standing in front of her, apologizing for something she never thought she'd hear acknowledged. "Grant," she said finally, her voice softer now, "thank you for saying that, but my life isn't something you can just sweep in and fix. I've worked hard to build something for myself, and I am proud of where I am." "I can see that," he said, glancing around the bakery. "You've built something beautiful." She nodded, the smallest hint of a smile tugging at her lips. "I have, and I need to keep building it, on my own." Grant seemed to understand. He nodded, his shoulders relaxing. "I won't get in your way, but if you ever need anything at Alley, you know where to find me." With that, he turned to leave. As the door closed behind him, Asha let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Her chest felt tight, but there was a strange sense of peace, too. Maybe, just maybe, she could finally let go of the weight she'd been carrying. Weeks later, Asha received a package at the bakery. Inside was a handwritten note. "Dear Asha, I hope this doesn't feel intrusive. I just wanted to leave something behind to show how much I believe in you. Thank you for being the light you are. Clara misses you terribly, but I am teaching her what it means to be brave, kind, and just. You taught me that. Please keep shining. The world needs more of you." There was also a check, enough to pay off her mother's medical bills and fund her brother's education. Asha's hands trembled as she held it. She didn't know if she'd ever cash it, but something about the gesture made her feel seen in a way she hadn't before. She folded the note carefully, tucking it into her pocket. Life wasn't perfect, and there were still battles to fight. But for the first time in a long time, Asha felt like she could breathe, and that was enough. Asha kept the note tucked in her wallet, folded neatly like a tiny secret she wasn't ready to share with anyone. She didn't cash the check. It sat in her drawer at home, a symbol of something she couldn't quite define. Was it closure? An apology? Or just a reminder that even in a world full of power imbalances, some gestures could still be genuine? She decided to leave it untouched for now. Instead, she threw herself into the bakery. Over the next few months, business picked up more than she could have imagined. Word spread about the cozy little shop with the soft music, warm smiles, and the best cinnamon rolls in the city. Asha began to dream bigger, adding new items to the menu, hosting community events, and even hiring an extra pair of hands. Then, One ordinary Tuesday, the bell above the bakery door chimed. Aisha glanced up, expecting a regular customer. Instead, Clara ran through the door, her golden curls bouncing, followed closely by Clara? Aisha said, start. Justice, and the moments that make a difference. Your support helps amplify voices that need to be heard, so let's grow this community of changemakers. Click subscribe now, and let's continue. Herself into Asha's arms, hugging her tightly. Asha, Clara squealed. I missed you so much. Asha blinked, her arms automatically wrapping around the little girl. What are you doing here? She asked softly, glancing over at Grant, who stood a few steps back, looking sheepish. I told Daddy I wanted to see you, Clara said matter-of-factly. And he said we could. Asha straightened, setting Clara down gently. She looked at Grant, her eyebrows raised. You just showed up unannounced? Grant rubbed the back of his neck. I know it's unorthodox, but Clara's been asking about you non-stop. I figured it was time I stopped avoiding things. If this is overstepping, we'll leave. Asha sighed, torn between irritation and the undeniable warmth she felt seeing Clara's bright smile. It's fine, she said eventually, motioning to a table near the window. Have a seat. I'll bring you some. Clara beamed, dragging her father to the table. Asha retreated to the kitchen, taking a moment to collect herself. She had moved on, or at least she thought she had. But seeing them here, so unexpectedly, stirred something deep inside her, something she wasn't sure she was ready to face. When she returned, she placed a plate of cookies and 2 steaming cups of cocoa on the table. Clara dove in immediately, but Grant hesitated, his gaze fixed on Asha. This place suits you, he said after a moment. You've built something amazing. Thank you, she said simply, sitting across from him. So, what brings you here besides Clara's request? Grant leaned back, his expression serious. I wanted to check in. I know it's been months, and I didn't want you to think I'd forgotten everything we talked about. I've been reevaluating a lot of things in my life. My priorities, the way I treated people, the kind of example I want to set for Clara. Asha studied him, searching for any hint of insincerity. But his eyes held only honesty, and perhaps a touch of vulnerability she hadn't seen before. I am glad you are making changes, she said cautiously. But what does that have to do with me? He hesitated. Because you are part of that change. Meeting you, working with you forced me to see things I'd been blind to. And I don't just mean feeling. I mean the way I was complicit in things I didn't even question. Lydia's words, the way people like you were treated in spaces like ours. I want to do better, Asha, and I want Clara to do better. Asha's chest tightened. For so long she'd carried the weight of being invisible, dismissed, or underestimated. Hearing him say these things felt like the tiniest crack in that wall. Still, she wasn't sure if she could let him in again. I appreciate that, she said carefully. But you don't owe me anything, Grant. You've said your piece and I've moved on. I am happy now. I know, he said softly. And I am not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know that you matter. Not just to Clara, but to me, to the world. Asha felt her throat tighten. She looked away, focusing on Clara, who was happily munching on her second cookie. Clara's lucky to have a dad who wants to grow, she said finally. But don't come here expecting me to fix anything for you. That's not my job. I wouldn't dream of it, he said. All I want is to support you however you'll let me. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Asha didn't know what the future held, but for now, she was content with the life she'd built. And maybe, just maybe, she could let this be part of her story not as a weakness, but as a reminder of her strength. As they left, Clara hugged her tightly again. I'll come back soon, okay? The little girl promised. Asha smiled, brushing a curl from Clara's face. You bet. As the door closed behind them, Asha stood in the quiet of her bakery, the warmth of their visit lingering. Maybe Grant had been right, she did matter. And in a world that often told her otherwise, that was more than enough. Asha went about her evening as usual, tidying the bakery and preparing for the next day. But her thoughts kept wandering back to Clara's laughter and the sincerity in Grant's eyes. It wasn't just his words, those could be brushed off, but the effort he'd made to bring Clara there, the vulnerability he'd shown in admitting his fault, it stayed with her. like a melody she couldn't stop humming. Over the next few weeks, Clara and Grant became semi-regulars at the bakery. It was always Clara who led the charge, bounding through the door with her infectious energy. But Asha couldn't ignore the steadiness of Grant's presence. He never overstepped, never pushed, always staying in the background as Clara filled the space with her joy. He would sit at a table, sometimes helping Clara with her homework, sometimes reading a book, but always giving Asha space. One rainy afternoon, after the last customer left, Clara approached the counter, her homework folder in hand. "Asha," she said, fidgeting, "can I ask you something?" "Of course," Asha said, wiping her hands on her apron. "Do you like my dad?" The question caught her off guard. Asha's heart skipped, and she glanced over at Grant, who was engrossed in his laptop in the corner, oblivious to their conversation. She crouched down so she was at Clara's eye level. "Why do you ask, sweet?" "Because he likes you," Clara said matter-of-factly. "I can tell." Asha smiled gently. "Clara, sometimes grown-ups have complicated feelings. Your daddy and I, we're just friends." Clara tilted her head, her brows furrowed. "But he's different now. Happier. He talks about how brave you are, and you make him smile. Isn't that what people do when they like each other?" Asha felt her chest tighten. "Your daddy and I come from very different worlds, and sometimes those differences make things tricky." Clara nodded slowly, as if processing this. Then she smiled, her innocence shining through. "Well, I think you are the best person ever, and if I were him, I'd pick you." Asha chuckled, her heart both aching and full. "Thank you, Clara. That means a lot to me." As Clara returned to her table, Asha stood there for a moment, lost in thought. Different worlds. The phrase echoed in her mind. It was true, wasn't it? Grant's world was one of power and privilege, a world that had never been kind to people like her. And yet, he was truly trying to bridge that gap. Did that matter? Could it ever be enough? Later that evening, as they prepared to leave, Grant approached. "Asha," he said softly, "can I talk to you for a minute?" She glanced at Clara, who was busy putting on her coat. "Sure." Grant hesitated, his hands in his pockets. "I just wanted to thank you again for letting us be part of this space. I know it's not easy, especially with everything that's happened." "It's not," she admitted, "but Clara, she makes it worth it." He nodded, a small smile playing at his lips. "She adores you. She talks about you constantly. And she's not the only one who thinks the world of you." Asha felt a lump form in her throat. "Grant, I am not asking for anything," he said quickly. "I just wanted you to know. You've changed my life, Asha. You've shown me what it means to be better, to see beyond my own privilege. And for that, I'll always be grateful." She searched his face, looking for any sign of manipulation, but there was none. Just honesty. Vulnerability. It terrified her and warmed her all at once. "Thank you," she said quietly. "That means more than you know." As they left, Clara waved enthusiastically, her laughter ringing out into the rainy evening. Asha watched them go, her emotions swirling. She didn't know what the future held for her and Grant, whether their paths would truly intertwine or remain parallel. But for now, she was content to let things unfold at their own pace. One thing was certain, though. Her story was far from over. And for the first time, Asha felt like the author of her own life, writing each chapter with strength, dignity, and the weeks turned into months, and the rhythm of Asha's life began to settle again. The bakery flourished, her relationships deepened with the community, and she found herself surrounded by warmth she had created with her own hands. Clara and Grant continued to visit regularly, always bringing a mix of joy and complexity into her day. One chilly evening, as the sun set early and the bakery's warm lights glowed against the frosty windows, Asha was closing. The last customer had left, and she was wiping down the counter when the familiar chime of the bell startled her. She turned to see Grant standing there alone, his coat dusted with snow. "Grant?" she said, surprised. "We're closed." "I know," he said softly, stepping further inside. "I waited until the end of the day. I wanted to talk to you." Asha sighed, setting down the towel. She crossed her arms, unsure of what to expect. "What is—" He hesitated, looking nervous. "I didn't want to say this with Clara around. She's too young to understand everything. But I need to be honest with you, Asha, about how I feel." Her stomach tightened, and she shook her head slightly. Grant, we've been through this. You don't have. I am in love with you. The words came out steady, deliberate, leaving no room for doubt. Asha's breath caught, her heart racing. She opened her mouth, but no words came. I've been in love with you for a long time, he continued, his voice calm but filled with emotion. At first I didn't even realize. I thought it was admiration, respect, guilt. But it's more than that. It's the way you carry yourself, the way you fight for what you believe in, the way you've created this beautiful life for yourself. You make me want to be for Claire, for myself, for you. Grant, Asha said finally, her voice shaking. Do you understand what you are saying? Do you understand what it would mean for someone like me to be with someone like you? He stepped closer, his gaze steady. I understand it won't be easy, that the world will have its opinions, but I don't care about any of that. I care about you, about us, if you'll let there be an us. Asha felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. You don't get it, do you? This isn't just about the two of us, it's about the way the world sees us, sees me. Do you know how exhausting it is to constantly prove your worth? To fight for a seat at a table that wasn't built for you? I don't know, he admitted, but I want to learn. I want to understand, and I want to fight with you, not against you. Her walls, so carefully built over years of pain and resilience, began to crack. She wanted to believe him, to trust that this man who had once been blind to his privilege could truly stand by her side. But fear held her back, the fear of heartbreak, of disappointment, of losing herself in a world that wasn't kind to people like her. She shook her head, wiping her eyes. I don't know if I can do this, Grant. I don't know if I have the strength. You don't have to decide right now, he said gently. Take all the time you need. I am not going anywhere, Asha. I'll be here however you'll have me. As a friend, as a customer, as whatever you need. Asha looked at him, searching his face for any sign of insincerity. But all she saw was truth, raw, unfiltered, and terrifyingly real. I'll think about it, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. He smiled, a soft, understanding smile. That's all I can ask for. As he left, the door closing softly behind him, Asha stood in the quiet of the bakery, her heart and mind in turmoil. She wasn't sure what her next step would be, but one thing was clear. For the first time in a long time, she felt seen, truly seen. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to take the first step toward something new. The night after Grant's confession, Aisha barely slept. Her thoughts circled endlessly, pulling her back to every interaction they'd had. She thought about Clara's innocent love, Grant's visible effort to grow, and the way he looked at her not with pity, but with respect, admiration, and something deeper. And yet, her fears loomed large, whispering all the ways this could go wrong. The next day, Asha threw herself into her work at the bakery. She kneaded dough with a force that left her arms sore, poured her heart into crafting the perfect pastries, and greeted every customer with her usual warmth. But even amidst the bustle, Grant lingered in the corners of her mind. That evening, she called her best friend, Nia. What's wrong? Nia asked, the moment she answered. You sound tense. Asha sighed, curling up on her couch with a cup of tea. It's complicated. When isn't it? Spill. Asha hesitated before explaining everything: Grant's visits, Clara's love for her, his confession, and her own swirling emotion. She didn't hold back, laying bare the hope and the fear that had taken root in her heart. Nia was silent for a moment before speaking. Asha, I get it. You've spent your whole life guarding yourself because the world hasn't given you the luxury of vulnerability. Maybe this isn't about the world. Maybe this is just about you and him. What if it doesn't work out? Asha asked, her voice small. What if it does? Nia countered. You are allowed to take chances, Asha. You are allowed to let people love you. And from what you've told me, it sounds like he's willing to fight for you for this. Asha's throat tightened. I don't know if I can trust. You won't know until you try, Nia said gently. But whatever you decide, just make sure it's what you want, not what the world says you should want. A few days later, as snow blanketed the city, Asha found herself standing outside Grant's office building. She hadn't planned to come here, but her feet had carried her there anyway. The sleek glass facade reflected the sky, and for a moment she almost turned back. Then she thought of Clara's bright smile, of Grant's words, of her own lingering question. Taking a deep breath, she stepped inside. The receptionist greeted her warmly, and within minutes Grant appeared, his expression shifting from surprise to cautious hope. He was still in his suit, but his tie was loosened, and his eyes softened as they met hers. "Asha," he said, his voice steady. "I wasn't expecting you." "I wasn't expecting me either," she admitted. "But I needed to talk to you." He nodded, leading her to a quieter corner of the lobby. "What's on your mind?" Asha took a deep breath, the words tumbling out before she could second-guess herself. "I've been thinking about what you said, about everything, and I am scared, Grant. I am scared of what this could mean, of what people will say, of letting myself." His expression was earnest, his voice soft. "I am scared too, Asha. But the thought of not trying scares me even more." She looked down at her hands, her voice trembling. If we do this, I need to know you are ready. Ready for the judgment, the stares, the questions. Ready to stand by me when it gets hard." Grant reached out, his hand hovering near hers before resting gently on the table between them. "I am ready, Asha, for all of it. And if you are not, I'll wait. As long as it takes." She met his gaze, searching for doubt or hesitation. There was none, only sincerity, steady and unwavering. "I don't know where this will go," she said quietly. "But I am willing to try." His smile was slow and warm, like the first rays of sunlight breaking through a storm. "That's all I could ever ask for." The days that followed were tentative, filled with cautious steps and quiet moments. They didn't dive headfirst into a relationship. Instead, they took their time, learning how to navigate the space between them. Clara was ecstatic, her joy a constant reminder of why they were trying. It wasn't easy. There were whispers, stares, and moments that tested their resolve. But for every challenge, there was also growth. Grant's willingness to learn, Asha's bravery in letting him in, and the quiet strength they found in each other. One evening, as they sat together in Asha's tiny apartment, Clara asleep in the next room, Asha looked at Grant and felt something she hadn't in years. It was fragile, imperfect, but it was real. And for the first time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could build something beautiful together. Because love wasn't about erasing differences or pretending the world wasn't broken. It was about choosing to stand together despite it all, and for Asha, that was a story worth writing. As weeks turned into months, Asha and Grant's relationship slowly deepened. It wasn't without its struggles, of course. There were moments when Asha doubted herself, doubted them. She worried about being seen as a charity case in Grant's world, or worse, as someone he was with to prove something to himself or to others. But every time those fears crept in, Grant's actions spoke louder than her doubt. He listened when she shared her concerns. He stood up for her when someone made a careless comment, never letting it slide. And, most importantly, he didn't try to diminish her experiences or paint over them with platitudes. He faced the hard conversations head-on, acknowledging the privileges he had taken for granted for so long. One day, while they were walking through the park with Clara, Asha decided to test the waters of their future. Snowflakes drifted lazily from the sky, landing in Clara's hair as she ran ahead to build a snowman. "Grant," Asha said, breaking the peaceful silence between them, "have you thought about what this looks like long-term?" He slowed his pace, glancing at her. "You mean us?" She nodded. "Yes, us. You, me, Clara, and everything that comes with." He stopped walking, turning to face her fully. "I think about it every day." "And?" she prompted, her breath clouding in the cold air. "And I see a future with you," he said simply. "I know it won't be easy. I know there will be challenges. But I also know that I've never felt about anyone the way I feel about you. I want us to build something together not just despite the world, but because of it. To show Clara that love isn't about perfection, but about choosing each other, over and over." Asha blinked back the sting of tears, her heart swelling with both hope and fear. "That's beautiful, Grant, but it's also idealistic. Love alone won't protect us from the world." "No, it won't," he agreed. But love, combined with respect, patience, and hard work, that's something strong, something real. Before she could respond, Clara called out from a few feet ahead. Asha, Daddy, come help me with the snowman. Grant held out his hand to her, his eyes steady. I am not asking you to trust me blindly. I am asking you to trust me enough to try. Asha hesitated for a moment before slipping her hand into his. His warmth was reassuring against the winter chill. Okay, she said softly. Let's try. Months later, as spring began to bloom, the bakery became more than just a business. It became a gathering place for their growing circle of friends and community members. Grant often helped out during busy weekends, and Clara was a constant presence, her laughter filling the space like music. One sunny afternoon, as Asha served coffee to a group of regulars, she noticed Grant and Clara sitting at a table by the window. Clara was animatedly telling a story, and Grant was watching her with a look of pure joy. Asha paused, taking in the scene, and felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. This wasn't the life she had planned for herself, but it was a life she was proud of, a life she had chosen, brick by brick, against all odds. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't just feel hopeful, she felt free. Years later, the bakery had expanded into a thriving hub for the community. It wasn't just a place for pastries and coffee. It hosted storytelling nights, fundraisers, and cultural events. Asha's vision had come to life, and she had become a pillar of strength and inspiration for those around her. Grant was by her side every step of the way, not as a savior, but as a partner who respected and admired her resilience. Clara, now a teenager, often helped out in the bakery, her bright smile reminding Asha of why she had taken this leap of faith. On a quiet evening, as the three of them sat together in the bakery after hours, Clara looked up from her book and said, "You know, this place is like a second home." Asha smiled, reaching out to squeeze her hand. "That's exactly what I hoped it would be." As she looked at Grant and Clara, Asha realized that the life they had built wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. It was filled with love, challenges, and moments of triumph. And in a world that often tried to divide, they had chosen to stand together, proving that real, imperfect, courageous love could bridge even the widest gaps. The day of Asha and Grant's wedding was one of those rare, perfect days where the sun shone warmly, and the breeze carried a soft, comforting hum. They chose to hold the ceremony in the park where they'd had so many meaningful conversations, surrounded by friends, family, and the community they'd built together. Asha wore a simple, elegant gown that flowed like a dream, her natural curls adorned with tiny white flowers. Grant stood at the altar, his face a mixture of awe and joy as he watched her walk down the aisle. Clara, wearing a pale yellow dress that complemented her bright smile, walked ahead of Asha, scattering petals with a grace that only a teenager trying not to trip could manage. The ceremony was heartfelt and intimate, filled with laughter and a few tears. When it came time for their vows, Grant spoke first. "Asha," he began, his voice steady but filled with emotion, "you've taught me more about love, strength, and resilience than I ever thought possible. You've shown me what it means to truly see someone and to choose them every single day. I promise to stand by you, to grow with you, and to fight for the life we've built together. You are my light, my partner, my everything." Asha's eyes glistened as she took his hands. "Grant, you walked into my world, not to change it, but to understand it, to respect it, and to honor it. You've shown me that love isn't just about words, it's about action, patience, and showing up, even when it's hard. I promise to show up for you, for Clara, and for the life we're building together. You are my safe place, my partner, and my home." When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, the crowd erupted in cheers as Grant and Asha kissed, sealing a promise not just to each other but to the life they were creating together. Later that evening, at the reception held under a canopy of fairy lights, the atmosphere was filled with joy. People laughed, danced, and toasted to the couple. But the highlight of the evening came when Clara stood up to give her speech. Clara walked to the center of the gathering, holding a microphone with the confidence of someone who'd been planning this moment for weeks. She cleared her throat, her cheeks flushed with excitement. "Hi, everyone," she began, her voice steady. "For those of you who don't know me, I am Clara Grant's daughter and now, officially, Asha's stepdaughter. But honestly, calling her my stepmom feels weird because Asha has been so much more than that to me." She paused, glancing at Asha, who smiled back at her with tear-filled eyes. "When Asha came into our lives, everything changed. My dad started smiling more, our house felt warmer, and I realized what it meant to have someone who truly cares about you. Asha didn't just bring amazing cookies and cinnamon rolls into our lives, though. Let's be honest, those are the best. She brought love, patience, and this incredible ability to make you feel like you matter." Clara's voice softened, and she looked directly at Asha. "Asha, you didn't have to love me, you didn't have to be there for me the way you were, but you chose to every single day. You've taught me that family isn't about blood, it's about love. And today, I am so proud to call you my family." The crowd let out a collective "ah" as Clara turned to her dad. "And Dad, you've always been my hero, but seeing the way you've loved and supported Asha has made me look up to you even more. You showed me what it means to fight for the people you love." Clara took a deep breath, her eyes shining. "So, here is to Asha and Dad, two people who've taught me that love isn't always easy, but it's always worth it. I love you both so much, and I am so happy we're a family." The crowd erupted into applause as Clara handed the microphone back and ran over to hug Asha and Grant. Asha pulled her into a tight embrace, whispering, "I love you too, Clara, always." As the night wore on and the dance floor filled with laughter and joy, Asha stood with Grant and Clara, watching the people they loved celebrate with them. For the first time in her life, Asha felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be, surrounded by love, family, and a future filled with promise. And as she looked up at the stars, she silently thanked the universe for guiding her here, one step at a time.